Afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Lynn Weil, Director of Artificial Intelligence. But first, a brief bit of housekeeping. We're holding this seminar in hybrid format with folks here in the room as well as online. For those online, if you experience any technical issues, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to alert us, and a CSET team member will try to help you out. Please don't use the chat for anything else just yet. We'll come back to it for Q&A after the presentation. And now it's time to turn the mic over to our moderator. Oliver Heyman has almost 15 years of experience in consulting and technology, delivering business critical solutions for leading organizations across Europe, Asia, and the United States. For the past 5 years, Oliver has held leadership roles at Amplify, one of Europe's leading AI scale-ups, and he currently leads Amplify's professional services team. He thrives on delivering cutting-edge AI solutions for CSET and other mission-based clients around the world. Oliver has a degree in chemistry from the University of Nottingham. Oliver, over to you.
Thanks very much, Lynn, and welcome everybody, both in the room here and online. As Lynn said, we've got a fantastic lineup today. We're going to hear some killer insights on the China's AI workforce. So without further ado, let me introduce our speakers. First, we have Luke Kozlowski. Luke is a research analyst at Georgetown's Center of Security and Emerging Technology, CSET. He focuses on workforce policy with an emphasis on increasing access to AI careers through alternative training pathways. His work has been featured in New America and The Hill. Previously, Luke was a research associate at the Potomac Institute for Policy Studies, where he worked on science and technology policy and founded the Center for Enterprise, Exploration, and Defense in Space. Luke has also served as a staffer in the House of Representatives and holds a Bachelor of Science in Political Science from Santa Clara University. Welcome, Luke. And secondly, we have Dalia Peterson. Dalia is also a research analyst at Georgetown University's CSET, Center for Security and Emerging Technology. Her research work focuses on how China harnesses predictive policing algorithms and facial, voice, and gait recognition technologies for AI-powered surveillance programs within its own borders and abroad. At CSET, she also studies how China is developing its artificial intelligence education and workforce pipelines. Her work has been published by the Brookings Institute, Diplomat, The Hill, The National Interest, and Routledge. She has been quoted in Marketplace and the Wall Street Journal, among others. Prior to joining CSET, she worked for US-China Economic Security Review Commission, the US State Department's Virtual Student Federal Service, and the Foreign Commercial Service at the US Embassy in Beijing. She holds a BA in Economics and Chinese Language with a minor in China Studies from the University of California, Berkeley, and is currently pursuing an MA in Security Studies from Georgetown University. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Luke to begin the presentation.
Thank you so much. There's a slight technical difficulty with the slides moving forward, and it's still not working. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Technical difficulty resolved. Thank you guys so much for being here, both virtually and in person. It's really nice to see a bunch of friendly faces in the crowd. So this work is, the presentation we're about to give is an overview of a report that we just released on Monday. And it's the culmination of about 2 years of hard work by a whole lot of people. So I just want to thank Diana Gelhaus, who heads up our workforce line of research here at CSET. I want to thank the whole CSET data team for their tireless work, helping us get the data and then analyze it as well. Then I want to thank Oliver and all of Amplify, because literally without them, this wouldn't exist. And then also thank you to Jacob, who's in the crowd, who helped a lot with these slides. So thank you, everybody, and thank you for coming. So what we're going to see next is basically where this work fits within the overall workforce line of research. Thank you so much. And so this is our big paper on the China's AI workforce, and we're going to have a bunch of work stemming off of that. But we also have a whole bunch of other products coming down the pipeline in a bunch of other fields, which you can see here on the screen. So if any of this interests you, find somebody from CSET afterwards, talk to them about it, or check out our website. So today we're going to be talking about what the AI workforce is and why we care about it. We're going to go over some of the currently available data on the Chinese AI workforce. Then Dalia is going to give an overview of China's efforts to increase its own domestic supply. And then we're going to talk about some of our takeaways from our work on analyzing China's demand for AI workers. We're going to go through some of the key takeaways and then go over some of the future work we have planned for this data set. So first, what is the AI workforce? Why do we care about? And what's the value in analyzing China's AI workforce? So at CSET, we've developed a pretty broad definition of AI talent, and it's anyone who can participate in the design, development, or deployment of an AI system. So we've broken it into 4 different categories of occupations, 2 technical and 2 non-technical. We think this is really important because you need both to create effective and safe AI. You can see technical team 1 up at the top. That's your no-kidding research scientists, software developers, people in the trenches making AI systems. It's often what you hear about when people talk about AI talent. Technical team 2 are people who possess the knowledge, skills, and abilities to work on AI systems, maybe with a bit of lateral training or upskilling. So for the purposes of today, when we talk about technical talent, we're talking about both 1 and 2. And if we're talking about top tier talent or technical team 1, we'll specifically call it out. It's really important to note that in our definition, we're talking about entire occupations and skills. We're not talking about everyone who is working on the AI workforce. It's everyone who could work on AI. So why is AI workforce knowledge important? Basically, AI is a critical emerging technology for both the economy and for national security. And in order to build good AI, you need great talent. So if the US wants to maintain its lead, it needs to maintain its lead in talent as well. So when looking at China, it's important because the AI workforce is both global and highly competitive. So we know that China is making efforts to build up its own domestic supply, and it's also making efforts to bring in some foreign talent back into its ecosystem as well. So when we're making workforce and education policy domestically, we need to understand what China's doing, why they're doing it, and how successful they've been, so that we can make data-informed and driven decisions for policymakers here. So we took a look first at what data is available on China's AI workforce already. And we found it's pretty lacking. So there's some information, but it's largely anecdotal, a little bit sporadic. So we found a couple of reports about critical talent shortages in really key AI related fields, which would indicate that there is more demand relative to supply. However, we also found a lot of evidence of increasing number of Chinese graduates in STEM fields as well that aren't able to find jobs after graduation. So that kind of conflicts with that previous finding. Similarly, we found that demand has been driven in AI by rapid growth in their domestic AI ecosystem, both from mega companies and startups and state-backed labs. But at the same time, we're seeing signs that that demand may be starting to slow down from regulatory crackdowns by their government, supply chain crunches, ripple effects from high inflation, things like that. So there's some information, it's kind of conflicting. It's really hard to tease meaning out of it or to drive policy. So we decided that we needed to go out and get more data, which we love to do at CSET. So Dahlia is in a minute going to talk about what we found on the supply side by looking at what they're doing to build up talent. But on the demand side, we still needed some solid data to look at. So we partnered with Amplify, which is a UK-based machine learning company. And we built out this huge data set of 7 million job postings from all across China. And it's really, really a great resource. So I want to emphasize this is the first of its kind. No one's ever had this data before, and we're really excited about it. We've already got a bunch of great findings that we're presenting today, but we're going to continue working on it and teasing out better and better stuff, try and answer some of those questions that have been previously unanswerable. So I'm going to turn it over to Dahlia to talk about the AI ecosystem within China.
Great, thank you so much, Luke. And it's I want to thank everyone at CSET who has helped support this and everyone for attending this event, both in person and online. So on the education landscape side of things, we can see that China begins its education in AI very early at the primary school level. And there are several strategic plans that help shape the high school through the postdoc level in terms of educational approaches. There are 2 plans that I will mention very quickly that are both from the Ministry of Education, and they both came out in 2018. The first one mandated curriculum in high school for AI coursework. And the second one led to the creation of an AI major, as well as setting goals for launching at least 50 university AI institutes and at least 100 what they call AI plus X cross-disciplinary majors. And our research has shown that China has met and exceeded both of those goals for institutes and the major. So to date, starting from 2019, there has now been 440 universities in China that are offering the standardized AI major. And there is a high representation of China's most elite universities amongst this bunch, as well as all of the 7 sons of national defense. So those are universities that are supervised by the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, and they are very specifically intended to support China's military civil fusion drive. There is also the University AI Institutes. I'll talk more about that in a second. But first, we'll take a bit of a closer look at these majors. We can see that there's the highest concentration of them in Shandong, Jiangsu provinces, as well as Beijing. Interestingly, there are fewer elite universities in Shandong and Jiangsu than in Beijing. Beijing has quite a high concentration of these elite universities, but there are 4 of the 7 sons of national defense also represented across just these 3 areas. So on back to institutes, again, these did exceed China's goal set in 2018. So far, our tally indicates that there are at least 17 research institutes and 33 AI colleges. So there are 2 categories of these institutes. And the main distinction between the 2 is that research institutes are a lot more focused on basic and applied research, and colleges are more focused on talent training, and they either offer the AI major directly or they offer majors that are adjacent to AI. And another way that we can look at these university AI institutes is looking at their focus per region. So we can see that in Beijing, there is a lot more of a focus on research. So there's more research institutes than there are colleges. And you can see the various research foci that they have here on the slide. Jiangsu, on the other hand, is more focused on AI colleges than on research institutes. And in Tianjin, we can so far see that there are no research institutes to date, and that it is entirely focused on providing talent training purposes. So there's uneven emphases across the country. Now I will turn it back to Luke.
Sweet, thank you. So as you can see, Dahlia and our team was able to collect a lot of great supply side information, but we still needed to fill in that gap on the demand side to complement it. So this is why we partnered with Amplify, and the Amplify team crawled 4 Chinese job boards and their websites and pulled job postings from each of them. And what they did with the data is they brought it in, they cleaned it up, and then they separated all the information into different fields. So we were able to pull job descriptions, education levels, education requirements, excuse me, experience requirements, company names, job titles, all this great information. And then once that was done, Amplify, with our aid, built a job classifier. So we were able to sort all these jobs either into non-AI or AI. And then once we had that, we were able to classify each of the AI jobs into one of our 4 categories that we've used to analyze the US workforce. So using all that methodology, we were able to see that of the almost 7 million unique job postings, about 1/3 of them were actually AI or AI related. Of those 1/3, there was also close to 1 million that were in technical roles. So that was that technical team 1 and technical team 2. And then within that, we used a set of keywords that were AI-specific applications and approaches, which I'll talk about in a later slide. And we found 36,000 very specific AI-related or AI-specific jobs and able to tease out some of the fields that those were in. So in our report, we cover an analysis of almost all the fields, but for today's purposes, I'm gonna cover 3 of them. The first one is education requirements. So in the red box, you can see technical team 1 and 2, and you can see that the majority of job postings in those categories actually require a bachelor's degree. So this mirrors what we see in the US, where for technical roles, you're almost always gonna see a bachelor requirement. And it can be used, in China, it's used as a kind of gatekeeping mechanism so that when in the hiring process. However, interestingly, in technical team 1, the second bar, you can see that there's also a substantial amount of jobs that accept less than a bachelor's degree. So this is a little bit different from the US. So in this, about 31% of the technical team 1 job postings accepted an associate's or less, compared to technical team 1 job postings in the US, where only about 7 do. So this shows that there's a little bit more willingness from Chinese companies to hire technical talent with less than a bachelor's degree, which is quite interesting. The second field is about experience. So you can see the 4 bars on the right. These are all of our AI fields. Almost all of the job postings, or at least a good majority of them, require 5 or less years of experience. So this was really interesting to us, so we tried to figure out why. And the first reason ties back to the education requirement. So we see a lot of these job posts requiring a bachelor's degree. So we think that suggests that companies are using that bachelor's degree as a signal of competence rather than the 5 years of experience. Second reason might be that these job boards are simply not the place where people advertise more senior positions. So a lot of informal networks, word of mouth referrals, using headhunters. And this is a pretty common practice. It's pretty widely used in America as well. The third possible reason is also, we found in a lot of job postings references to fresh graduates. And it might be that some of these employers are trading the experience for new graduates who are willing to put in a lot of time and effort, the extreme work ethic. So that's what you often hear referred to as the pervasive 996 schedule, which is working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. So that might be a trade-off that some companies are willing to take to access the large amount of fresh graduates that are coming out of universities. And the final one that I'm talking about is the AI-specific posts that I mentioned, the 36,000 of them. So we created a group of 25 different AI keywords. So these are AI approaches like machine learning and deep learning, and then AI applications like image recognition or computer vision. And we use those to down select from technical team 1 jobs and find which ones are working on these approaches or subfields. And we found a good amount, and it's also very interesting to look at what happens to the education level. So bachelor's requirements stay about the same, but you can see that they're less accepting of associate's degrees for these AI-specific roles, and there's often more requirements for graduate level degrees, implying that for these AI-specific roles, they're requiring a higher level of education across the board. So I'm going to throw it over to Dahlia to talk a little bit about our geographic analysis that we did.
Excellent. Thank you, Luke. So now turning to technical team 1, the very specific highest skills of AI talent, we can see that across all of the job postings in this team, there are 5 main clusters of job postings. And these are all, to us, not particularly surprising findings, given that there are very prominent AI companies that are located in these areas. So Guangdong in particular, with the highest concentration, is especially not surprising, given that it has Shenzhen, which has China's Silicon Valley. So there are companies like the genomics company BGI, the drone company DJI, and Huawei and Tencent as the tech giants, as well as the robotics firm UBTech. In Shanghai, we have the facial recognition giants CloudWalk and E2, as well as the Instagram equivalent in China, Xiaohongshu. In Jiangsu, there's more of the academic presence, but we have identified companies such as the intelligent speech company AI Speech. In Beijing, that is another very high concentration of major companies, including Baidu, the TikTok creator ByteDance, and the AI chip startup Cambricon. And lastly, in Zhejiang, the video surveillance giants, the world's 2 largest, Dahua and Hikvision, as well as Alibaba. But we wanted to get an even more specific look, as Luke alluded to. So we applied our set of 25 AI keywords to get the really no kidding AI jobs within technical team 1. And so we can see the exact same 5 rankings of those hubs as I just showed. But in one regard, we also found some unexpected findings, and those are in Hubei and Shanxi provinces. And these are surprising to us because, as we can see here on this slide, these are 4 hubs that are very well-known economic hubs. They are also 4 hubs that the government agency, the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, specifically highlighted in 2020 as the main drivers of AI activity in China. And Hubei and Shanxi do not fall into those areas. But we did a little looking into these provinces, and we can see that Wuhan in particular is the major driver in Hubei, and it has 96% of all the postings in the province. And their universities are very active in AI research, and especially in artificial general intelligence being the next frontier of AI development. In Shanxi province, we can see that Xi'an is the major driver there with 99% of the postings. And we've identified that they have an AI and robotics space there that is in partnership with Xi'an Jiaotong University, which is one of China's 9 most elite universities. We are also currently looking into defense applications of AI. And so far, what we have been able to identify, both through looking for evidence of very direct PLA employment or through a set of defense affiliated universities, that robotics and drone applications are particularly prominent in these defense clusters. And we have found evidence that they are directly being used by the People's Liberation Army, the Ministry of Public Security, and also the People's Armed Police. But we are having work that is forthcoming on this. So we look forward to sharing that with you at some point. So quickly back on this slide, on that report I mentioned from the ministry, these 4 regions are really the major demand and supply drivers. So that report indicated that 83% of the talent from all of China intends to work in these 4 regions, and 91% of the demand for all AI talent in the country is also from these 4 regions. So these are really the no kidding areas that are the biggest hotspots of AI activity in China. So one other way that we can look at this is just taking one small dimension of supply through AI majors. We do want to stress this is not something that is a perfect, just representative entire indicator of supply. It is just one that we can measure. And the same with job posts on the demand side. So we were able to see, and here on the left is a map that we showed you earlier, just with 3 regions highlighted. And so with Beijing and Jiangsu, we can see that they have both the highest number of AI major programs in the country, as well as some of the highest number of job posts. So their demand and supply is quite both quite high and linked together. So we cannot conclusively say that those who graduate from those programs are definitely going to work in those jobs, but it is fairly likely that they have the skills to work in those job positions. But on the other hand, we can see Henan, which is here on the middle of the map. That one is more of a mismatched trend where they have some of the highest number of AI major programs in the country, and yet they have some of the lowest demand with only about 210 job posts in that province. So one of our takeaways from this is that the talents who are trained in Henan, they may just get sucked up by those 4 hubs that we showed you earlier that have the greater demand drivers. And
Yeah, so I just want to emphasize again that this data source is incredibly rich with information. We're just now scratching the surface. You've seen we've pulled some analysis out of it already. That's great. And we're going to be continuing to do that with a bunch of papers that are coming out. It's also very interesting how many AI-related jobs we've already been able to find. And as we dig down deeper into it, we're going to be able to take a lot from those AI jobs and figure out exactly what kind of applications, what regions, how the AI supply and demand trends are working within China. And I'm just really excited to share that with everyone when we get there, but I'll throw it back to Dahlia.
yes, so on the supply side of things, we can see that China has several strategic plans that are really underpinning its approach, and that they are very actively building talent supply pipelines. And just 2 of the ways that they are doing this is through this AI major and through their university institutes. We can also see that there are those 4 major hubs that China is in terms of demand and supply for talent. There are a few exceptions to that. And then on more forthcoming work, the military applications that we have seen so far really show an emphasis on drones and robotics. We have a lot of future work coming, and we're genuinely echoing Luke's excitement here. We have a lot coming. It is a multi-year endeavor. And so here are some of the areas that we are going to be focusing on going forward that are really putting these job postings in the greater ecosystem context. We're going to be linking this to investment data, and we're going to be linking it to procurement data as well, and really taking a deeper dive into surveillance and military applications and getting a better sense of what these companies are looking for and what applications they are active in. So with that, that is the end of our presentation. Really thank you for your attention, and we are looking forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Luke and Dahlia. As I said, we'd love to have some questions from the audience, both in the room and online. So if you're online, please feel free to type away in the Q&A section. And if you have a question here in the room, please raise your hand and I think a microphone will find its way to you. Just while you're gathering your thoughts, maybe I can kick off with one. So Luke, you mentioned in the presentation that you used keywords to find the most AI associated and specific posts. I wonder if you could share a little bit more about what types of keywords you used and maybe which were the most common ones that you saw appearing.
Yeah, I would love to. So we used 25 keywords, as I said. And interestingly enough, the top 10 of those 25 accounted for like 95% of those 36,000. So topping the chart were three different techniques. So right at the top was artificial intelligence, which probably comes as no surprise. But then right after that was machine learning and then deep learning. But then as we go through rank 4 through 10, you start to get smatterings of applications as well. So there's things like robotics, data mining, computer vision, pattern recognition, natural language processing. And these are all really interesting because it means that there's jobs specifically focused on that. And one of the things that we're going to be working on is topic modeling, where we're pulling all of the job descriptions into a big database, and we're using cluster analysis plus some natural language processing. We're going to try and tease out the relationships between these applications, and then what kind of regions are they in, or what kind of companies are they hiring for these different types of things. So my colleague Jacob and I are going to be working on that in the next couple of months. So hopefully we'll be able to tease out the findings from those AI specific jobs.
That's brilliant. Yeah, fascinating. And as you say, a huge amount to come. It's probably worth reminding you all at this point, if you haven't found the original report that we've been talking about today, it's available on CSET's website. So please do find that, download it, read it. There's so much in there. And it's a really good foundation level report for all of the work that Luke has just described that's coming next. So do find that out. So yeah, a question maybe for Dahlia. So you mentioned in the report that there are talent shortages in specific AI fields. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So China is very much cognizant of the fact that they have severe talent shortages. Again, the awareness of this comes largely from government reports. And so earlier I cited a report from the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. We found another report from the Ministry of Human Resources, also from 2020. And they basically quantified that at that point, China had a talent gap in AI of over 5 million. And they said that if they didn't do anything about it to mitigate this shortage, that talent gap would go beyond 10 million by 2025. So they are very aware of the shortages that they have. And one way that they presented this is through supply demand ratios. And so they said at the current state, when you look at just all of the AI jobs and skills that are required, they have a supply demand ratio of 1 to 10, which means that there's only one person for every 10 available job postings. So quite a severe shortage. There was another report that came out from that Ministry of Industry that looked very specifically at these AI specific positions. So they even broke it down into specific AI positions. So at the one that was like perhaps the best, but still defined as a critical shortage was in AI chip engineers. So that was 0.37. But then at the very lowest end of that, they found that computer vision was at like 0.09. So there was like less than one person per postings available. So they are very actively, this like really sets into context why they are working so hard on plugging up these gaps through the AI major and the AI institutes. But this is something that we'll be watching closely to see if they produce more numbers in the future to show if they are plugging up these gaps or not.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Just one more from me, maybe then for Luke. So, Luke, you mentioned some of the fields that we were able to extract from the job posts. Were there any fields that you didn't touch on in the presentation, but that might be interesting?
Yeah, so we also looked at salary, but it was a little bit weird. It was definitely the hardest of the fields to normalize because each of the job postings, it wasn't clear whether it was contract based. Sometimes a lot of the postings were very clear and it was great, but some of them were maybe contract based. It was unclear. There was just a lot of kind of noise in some of the salary data. However, we did find that it's very geographically dispersed. So in some of the most wealthy and prosperous regions like Shanghai, like the max median value of salary ranges was up above 240,000 yuan. Whereas down at the very bottom in like Inner Mongolia, it was down at like 96,000. So like huge variance by region. Makes sense because you would find similar things in the US. But it's also comparatively low compared to what we would find, what we would think we would find in America. So we did some purchasing power parity analysis to see like what the equivalent would be in America if you were in the same salary. And for technical team 1 in America, the highest end of the salary is about like 180K. But for Chinese job postings in the same field, it was like down around like 43K, which is like pretty shocking difference. But we did a bunch of analysis, made sure the numbers were right. They're good. But it could be a relic of the fact that the experience levels, it was entry-level jobs, more junior level jobs coming out of a bachelor's degree instead of upper graduate degrees. So it was really interesting, and we're going to be diving a lot more into it as we go as well.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, we look forward to hearing more on that. Again, I'm just going to, if there's any questions in the room, please do raise your hand. We've got lots of great questions coming in online, and I'll pick a couple out now. So maybe changing gears from the demand side back to the supply side. There's a lot of interest in comparing the quality of China's AI education. How does it compare with the US and US universities? So maybe a question for you, Dalia. And also not only quality, but quantity as well.
Yes, that's a great question. So first on the quality indicators, this is something that we are currently actively looking into. But the slide I showed earlier where you can see the huge jump in the AI majors, and then that really tapers off, there was a very high degree of representation of China's most elite universities. So that being the C9 League, those are often known as China's Ivy League, or the double first class universities, which are 42 of the universities that China's pushing to become world class. Those have very high representation in the early batches, but then you can really start to see that peters out at one point. So in 2022, there was 95 of the majors approved. And those when looking at the names of those universities, a lot of them are just simply second or third tier universities and located in less like outside of those 4 belts. And so it does raise some questions that we are going to be looking into to really get a sense of, do they have the resources to adequately train, or are they simply just riding the AI bandwagon and trying to follow the strategic plans and get some positive recognition that way? And then, yeah, I believe that also addresses the quantity issue. But I'll flag here as well, we are looking into the AI institutes as well in terms of quality indicators. So some of our data at CSET looks at academic publications. And so we are in the midst of clustering those based on AI subfields to get a sense of what are they really researching and where are they publishing those papers as another indicator of quality.
Yeah, I can also jump in really quickly on the quantity as well. So some past CSET work has actually looked at STEM PhD graduates and trends over time. So that work has estimated that by 2025, China will be outproducing the US in STEM PhD graduates. They'll produce about 77,000 compared to about 40,000 in the US. So They also have a much larger population than the US, so that is not that shocking. But yeah, so they are outpacing in STEM PhDs, according to some past CSET research.
Brilliant. Thank you. Really interesting. Yeah, there's plenty more questions coming in online. So here's a very good one from Jim Burke. Through your research, could you identify whether the military was directly recruiting candidates, or does the military play more of a contractor support role?
Yes, so this is forthcoming work, but what I can say is that we did find evidence of direct PLA employment, and that will be forthcoming in future work. But it was very no kidding, the People's Liberation Army certain research institute that was directly attached, and we found evidence that they were very actively working on drone applications, and that is for direct military use. But then besides that, that's why we also looked at defense affiliated universities to get a better sense of the military civil fusion side. But in brief, yes, we did find direct military evidence, and we are PLA employment evidence, and we are continuing to look for more of those examples.
Okay, great. Question in the room here.
Thank you. Andrew Miluzzi from USAID. I have a question about the kind of methodology from getting from 6.2 million postings to the 30, I think it was 30% that were AI relevant in some way. And I'm curious, like, of course, there must have been many, many millions of more postings during this time period in general. And so the first question is like, how do you get from all the postings available to this 6.2 million? And then also like 30% feels like a lot to me. So I'm wondering if you're surprised by that. And I ask because a while ago, for totally separate reasons, I was Googling like to figure out how many blockchain engineers were, like how many postings there were in the US. And I got like 60 from IBM, but it turns out IBM was not hiring blockchain engineers. They just had in their description on a job site, blockchain. So it came up as a hit. And so I'm wondering like how you, whether through the machine learning approach or something else, like how you're kind of filtering out those results that are erroneous.
Yeah, so I can take some of the methodology questions. So the reason it's 6.8 as opposed to more or less is because we did it over the course of a couple of months in spring of 2021. Job postings exist from 2016 all the way to current on the job boards. But basically we scraped all of them off the job boards for that time period. And then we deduplicated them. We made sure that they were all not just noise and did a lot of spot checks to see whether they were like good documents or not. So that's how we arrived at 6.8 million. To down select it to the 1/3, that's the AI workforce. So as I said previously, our definition of AI workforce is purposefully broad. It contains both technical talent and non-technical talent. If you notice, we mostly focused on technical talent for this. Partially because it's of more interest for the conversations that we're having regarding this particular workforce. But that also means that there's a lot of commercial team applications or commercial team occupations and product team occupations that will inflate the number to more than just like your hardcore coders or whatnot. So that's part of it. And then what was the last part of your question? Sure. So we didn't just look at the company or the job title or the job description, or we looked at all of them. So when we were creating the classifier to sort jobs into each one of the categories, we actually manually labeled about, I think between us and Amplify, it was like 5,500 different jobs, which took forever. And it was a pain, but we needed to do that many because every time we iterated it, it got more and more accurate. And by the time we finished, like it was very accurate, like especially for the technical teams, it was, I think, up at least 90%, if not more, for technical teams. So that's how we filtered out jobs that were like kind of AI, but or kind of technical team, but not really. So yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned that there is a particular shortage of semiconductor talent in China, and I was just curious to know if you came across any data or any other steps that China is undertaking to plug that like chip making talent in particular.
Yeah, so in terms of the figures from this report, yes, they had that ratio for AI chip engineers. I don't believe that report specifically identified what they are trying to do. Like there is there's much more of a concerted effort for AI and that they actually standardized in artificial intelligence major and that they have several others. But I don't see as much of a concerted push to address that directly at like the semiconductor talent level. It is something that I have seen that they are cognizant of. But yeah, that is something that we could look further into.
Yeah, and I also will say that not yet on a lot of it, but our future analysis is hoping to pull things like that out. So we'll keep a special mind to look into semiconductor stuff as well.
Okay, I'll take another question from online just briefly. So the question is from Paul Hoper, who says, what does the competitive landscape look like versus the US? And maybe as a follow-on, other key nations.
Yeah, so we published on this last year in a report that directly compared the US and Chinese AI education systems. And so China has a far more centralized approach to this. The US is taking a much more piecemeal approach to it, but that is not exactly surprising because that is by the very nature of the design of the US education system is extraordinarily decentralized. But another major difference is that the US is a lot more focused on computer science education, which is also incredibly important for AI. But China, as we can see, getting started so early in primary school level is very specifically focused on developing those pipelines for AI specifically. And they are pairing that in concert with their computer science education. I think another big difference is in the interdisciplinary approach that China is putting on this. They are really not just doing just the hardcore STEM approach. In that they talk about that AI plus X interdisciplinary approach. We don't really see that nearly as widespread in the US. And this AI plus X is present at not only the university level, but all the way through the postdoc level. They're saying in the training of graduate level talent as well, we need to use the double first class universities and we need to use the AI plus X interdisciplinary approach to really bring in the social sciences and humanities to pair with the STEM approach.
And just to jump on, another facet of the competition for talent globally, one feature of China's AI workforce is that they heavily rely on domestic born talent, whereas that is not necessarily the case at all for the US. The US pretty heavily relies on foreign born talent, especially for top tier researchers. And CSET has a lot of great work that you can find indicating just how much we rely on it and policies to make sure that we have access to it moving forward.
Great. I thought I saw another hand about to go up. Ivy.
Thank you. I don't know how much you have looked into the perspectives between your findings and the US, but I was wondering which of your findings you find differs the most from what you see in the US?
Yeah, I would say like of all the things that we just laid out, it is probably the focus on computer science education in the US versus much more of a direct focus on AI, and very much related to that, the centralized approach that China is taking to this, where it is standardizing like a no kidding AI major that is listed as one of the approved majors from the Ministry of Education. And there's no such thing like that in the US education system.
Yeah, and I will just say for me, the thing that jumped out right away, because I focus a lot on community colleges, is just Chinese employers' willingness to accept associate's degrees as an indicator of competency, which you don't see at all in the US. I'll also say that the way that our data is structured at the moment is a little hard to do direct comparisons with demand in China with demand in the US. We can do it a little bit more we can do it quite a bit for technical talent at the moment, but we are, as our iterating our data sets, we're gonna be able to do a little bit more direct comparison as well.
Great. So there's a couple of questions coming through around the situation in the US. So who is working on the AI talent gap in the US? And as a follow-on, what about AI education in K-12 in the US?
We are working on the talent gap in the US. And not as many people as you would expect are. There's a couple of great nonprofit organizations that have been developing curriculum for K-12 education, AI for All, AI K-12, I think is what it's called. AI for K-12, and then there's a third one as well. And they're doing curriculum development, aligning competencies and assessments. A lot of great work that you can find for free on their websites. On the legislative front for K-12 AI education, it is less so, but we have a policy recommendation report that came out, I think last year, and we have a litany of recommendations within that about how we can improve access to AI education for K through 12 education, as well as secondary, as well as post-secondary, and throughout people's careers. So we've got a lot on it, and you can find it on our website pretty easily.
Great, thank you. There's a hand up here.
You mentioned that China is not only looking to increase its own supply of homegrown talent, but also they're looking to recruit talent from overseas. I'm just really curious what you saw in your data that related specifically to recruiting that foreign talent.
No, that is an excellent question. So we did see on one of the job boards, they had like a very specific tag that said for overseas returnees. But that is something that we are very cognizant of, the prevalence of talent recruitment programs. So far, I think seeing more evidence of the prioritization of that on the supply side. So there's a lot of mentions of this on like AI Institute website saying that we have these Changjiang scholars and we have these 1,000 talent recruits. But it is entirely possible that that is in our job posting data and that we just need to take that's something that we can definitely look into and see if those keywords show up in the job postings data as either we have previously hired that talent or we are looking to hire overseas talent.
Another hand here, yeah.
Hey, I'm Owen. I have a question related to China retaining its talent in these high-tech industries. So we know that there was a gap for AI workforce and China addressed it. We expect a gap going forward with semiconductor production in China. I'm wondering how you think that might affect these new trainees' ability to or desire to stay with domestic organizations for high-tech industries rather than moving elsewhere to work.
Yeah, and just to get a better sense of your question, are you referring to the recent change in export control policy by
Yes,
chance?
maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a little early to say what individual talent will decide to do in light of that. I could imagine that's engendering seismic shifts across the board, and so I would not be surprised if that also affected talent decision to whether or not to stay in China. That is definitely something that we can look for on the Chinese internet to get a sense of the sentiment and whether or not they're planning to shift. Because we could see there's a lot of pieces that came out on that when, for example, there was the discussion of banning Chinese students from coming to the US. That really changed the calculus of a lot of Chinese students. And so this could easily be another situation where that happens.
Yeah, and I'll also say that Technical Team 2 contains within it a lot of occupations that would be working on semiconductors. And we are in the process in the topic modeling of seeing whether there's a lot more hard sciences and things that could relate to semiconductor production in it. But I don't know yet. So it's a good question, and we're going to look at it.
Okay, thanks very much. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. So I've got one lined up, unless anyone else in the room wants to be brave and raise a hand. Okay, I'll go to the online crew then. So this may be a little bit controversial, or at least prompt some interesting discussion. But there's been a question here: is there any concern that your research could result in similar and/or future Chinese AI information fading from public view?
This is a very, very realistic concern, and we grapple with it literally every day as we do our work. We take steps as we can to archive our work as quickly as possible. Sometimes that is a bit of a cat and mouse game as well. Yeah, that is especially why I was not entirely forthcoming about work that is coming out. We do not want to affect our ability to publish that work before it has even emerged into public view. But yes, this is a very realistic concern, and the window is narrowing on this like as we speak. So it is something that we consider very carefully before we publish our research.
Yeah, and just to second that, obviously, as part of the company and part of the team involved in generating this data set is something that we think very, very carefully about all the time and have many, many discussions with you guys at CSET around possible mitigation steps and things like that. So I think it just emphasizes the urgency around this work and how important it is to do as much as possible with the data that's available and to keep collecting that data while we still can.
Yeah, I'll also add that it's not like security measures don't already exist, and you guys are
Yeah,
very good at your
yeah.
job. So that's why we have it in the first place.
Okay, I'll just give one final opportunity for anyone else in the room to raise a hand, but if not, I think we can bring the discussion to a close. Thank you everyone very much for your time and attention. It's been an absolute pleasure to present to you here today. And we thank you very much indeed for your great questions and great discussion. Thank you very much.